So it's Houston or it's Detroit. How did we get here? And how many times can one man lose a war draft along the way? Hello, friends. It's been a heck of a journey, but we made it all the way through the end of the regular season, at least the regular season for most of us. Not if you happen to be looking at that National League picture, but for the side of the bracket that we care about, Zach, we're here. We arrived. We have our answers, sort of. We know it's going to be Houston or it's going to be Detroit. So we look ahead and we also look back at all the things we got wrong. I'm excited for today's show.
You may remember when we did the war draft this year, which I'm 3-0 entering the 2024 season. I was at some Marriott and wrote down our draft picks back in March, and I stuck it in my headphones case. So every day when I would transcribe something, I would look at the list, and it was just a reminder. And boy, like for both of us, every day I was just sad or pained. This was our worst draft, was it not?
How is that possible? I mean, the team had a great year. You're staring at a first-round bye here. How did we have a terrible draft?
Because it's not, first of all, some of the key people who we thought would, we'll get to this, but some of our high draft picks flopped. Not necessarily their fault either. And I think it was a team that had many little contributions across the board. And that is not as conducive for this exercise.
Yeah, to that point, there were times this year where I felt really good about some of my draft picks, which we will get to all of them. And I love that this show, I love the war draft because it's a chance for us to reflect on the season ahead. And so it gives us one episode that I love, but now also on the back end, it gives us a second episode of content. It's just the show that just keeps on giving. But there was a time like at the All-Star break when one of my later round picks was an All-Star. Should probably give things away. I felt really good about the direction that I was headed. I said, "Oh, well, if I just double his production, then I'm gonna be great." Well, unfortunately, that man kind of faded in the second half.
For the record, I don't know the outcome of this. I'm going in blind. I tallied up my team's total, and it's the lowest total I've had in 4 years, I believe, by a decent amount. So,
well, how is that possible, considering the man that you took with the first pick, which we will get to in a second, that had one of his best years of his career in Fangraphs WAR. And for those unfamiliar, what we do, and I know many listeners have joined along this journey, before the season starts, Zach and I sit down, we do a draft of who we think is going to accumulate the most Fangraphs WAR. And we use Fangraphs as the war choice here. We could use any war, but we use Fangraphs. It's the easiest one for us to grab. And so we stick with that. And we go back and forth, and it's our way to preview the year. And Zach has kicked my butt for the last 3 years. We'll see what happens in the fourth year. I already have a pretty strong indication.
The problem is Jose Ramirez, who accounted for 6.5 WAR this season. He also accounted for 43% of my team's WAR. So I didn't get much help after that. And that's why I'm a little nervous going in, because I also
All right.
feel like you might be playing coy and there's going to be confetti. You probably recorded 4 different sounders for this, and you're going to have victory music, and I'm just going to have to live with it.
Yeah, well,
we'll see.
We should probably not delay anymore and just let the actions of our picks decide. You had the first pick in the war draft. You alluded to it. You took Jose Ramirez.
Do you remember why I had the first pick?
Probably had something to do with rock, paper, scissors.
Yeah.
Going to guess. Yeah. I will say, I think of the past 3 years we've done this, I've only had, the fourth year, I maybe only have Jose once. And the year that I had, was it last year that I had Jose? And he had one of his worst seasons. Not a bad season overall, but one of his worst Jose seasons. I just need to put more emphasis on winning rock, paper, scissors, clearly.
I think that's the key.
But go ahead, take your victory lap on Jose. He had a hell of a year.
Well, I will say, it didn't look great for a while. he was DHing a lot, and that was hurting his defensive value. And he was having a season where you wouldn't say he had started the decline, but you wondered if his best seasons were behind him. And then he got hot at one point I don't know, in the first half. And it was like, okay, here he is. He's back. And then I think he started getting like 40-40 vision, which is, they say it's twice as good as 2020. I don't know. I wear glasses and contacts. But it felt like that WAR total really shot up late in the season, and the stolen bases help. Once again, one of the league's best base runners according to the metrics and according to my 1510 vision or whatever it is. And you just look up, and it's amazing how year after year, and it's because he is such a well-rounded player, he's got one of the highest WAR totals in the league. Now, this was a year where Aaron Judge is over 11 and Bobby Witt's over 10 and Gunnar Henderson's up there and like Jaron Duran is up there. But if you ignore the WAR total and you look at, like he's in I think he was second in the American League in stolen bases and maybe third in home runs. I mean, that's so impressive just to be that diverse of a player, have those different skills. And we already know, like, the guy doesn't strike out. His walk rate took a hit this year, and you wonder if maybe that's something to keep an eye on moving forward. But I don't know. And he got really hot the last couple of weeks, and it's a couple things. One, it helped my WAR team, and then two, that's probably how you want him going into the playoffs, because he had hit a lull. I feel like when the calendar flipped to September, and then he really turned it on late. And the other thing with him, which we touched on the other day, but he's a safe bet to play. He missed 3 games this season. Only Mother Nature could prevent him from getting 40-40. So he's just still at 32 years old, one of the best all-around players in baseball.
Yeah, it's what gives you such hope for what lies ahead in his future, that he's so good across the board. But yeah, all the skills are going to take a decline, but when you contribute in so many different areas, you should still continue to be an above-average player for the next several years. And he's a guy that we never worried about him getting his payday and then not committing himself to being a great player anymore. I mean, he's already proven that the money's not really what drives him. Being here, being a part of this organization, sure, but just winning and being the best ball player he can, that's what gets that guy up out of bed every single day. And to have a season like this that, yeah, there were times where it didn't feel like it was going to be as impressive, but there's just something about what he gets in his mind. He wants to accomplish something. This year it was, I'm going to turn the stolen bases way up. It's like he had a little notch, a little slider that he could say, oh, yeah, I'm going to worry more about that this year. And then as 40-40 became more and more realistic, it's like it just took off in his brain. I'm not going to let this cease to happen. And the only thing, as you said, that could stop him was not playing that 162nd game. I have no doubt in my brain he would have gotten it.
Yeah,
the last day
pitcher.
of the season, I think he would have gotten it. He would have got to his doubles mark, the home runs, the stolen bases. Could have finished with 120 RBI too. That would have just looked great. 40, 120. That would have looked fantastic. But, oh well, 6.5 WAR. I guess you'll have to live with it, bud.
So remember, like mid-May, he was, and it's early. It's a quarter of the way into the season, but he was just very blah. His OPS was hovering around 700, and then Stephen Kwan went out. They lose 3 to the White Sox. It's like, what's going on here? Was this a mirage? The start of the season? And then he just went nuts, and he had a stretch where, over the course of, we're going to do some math here. I mean, you blink and his OPS shoots up 200 points. I remember we had this discussion back in, was it 19? when he was struggling and just had a weird year for him. And then all of a sudden, his OPS creeps up and creeps up and creeps up. And we were like, I think it was like around 600 all year. And we're like, just watch. He'll wind up over 800. And he did. And then he broke his hamate bone. And then he came back, hit a grand slam, hit a 3-run homer, and it finished above 800. And it's just, he can get like that, just have one of those tears. And that's what he did. So he had an 1134 OPS over the course of a month. 13 home runs, more walks than strikeouts, almost as many home runs as strikeouts. And it's just hard to keep him down for a long time. And I'm the season he had now, where he ties his career high with 39 home runs, 41 stolen bases. It makes me so interested, because we talk about his Hall of Fame candidacy all the time. It makes me so interested to see what these seasons are going to look like in his mid 30s. Because I find it hard to believe that he's going to have some super steep, abrupt decline. Father Time is undefeated, but you telling me he's just gonna next year come back and hit 18 home runs and steal 16 bases and have an OPS of 710? Like, I feel like it's gonna take a while to get there.
Yeah, the walk rate is an interesting thing that you brought up.
Mm-hmm.
Does he lose a little bit of the sharp, keen eyesight that helps him decide whether a pitch is going to be off the plate or just stick right there on the corner? Does he have to cheat a little bit as his career continues to progress because the bat speed isn't what it used to be? So now I have to start to swing a little bit sooner than I once did. I can't let it track as much. We'll keep an eye on that, but certainly not having those fears after the season that he had. And again, a 6.5 WAR season, and you had to be feeling extremely good about your top pick. He's disappointed about losing that 40-40 chance. This was your last chance maybe for him to have a final day to really put the nail in the coffin for me. I also feel that on my end, by the way, considering some of my draft picks, many of them would have still been in action in that final day of the season, including the guy that was going to pitch some bulk innings, but we'll get there. My first pick, I was so disappointed because I was hopeful that we would see more of a splitting the difference between 22 Andres Gimenez and 23 Andres Gimenez, and we didn't get there. Offensively, he's even down from where he was at last year. Really, the power is what is the culprit here. Now, defensively, still putting up fantastic numbers, and that's why I was really eager to take him with my top pick. Because even with all of my concerns about him never again getting to where he was at offensively in 22, I knew the baseline level of his defense was always going to provide just that lift, just that steady baseline that you knew was always going to be there. And so I was hopeful. I thought maybe there was some upside. I didn't get that upside, but I do get 2.8 wins above replacement. And all this is updated from even where I did this math last night. 2.8 wins above replacement for Andres Gimenez. I wish it would have been closer to what we saw in that All-Star campaign. But, again, this is a steady baseline. It's nowhere near what you got with your top pick. But it could have been far, far worse, considering where we'll get with some of my higher picks.
Yeah, I mean, 2 years ago it was 6.1. And I don't expect him... Like, his OPS was over 800 that year. A 141 WRC plus just doesn't seem possible moving forward. But it is... I understand where you're... Like, he had 20 stolen bases 2 years ago, and he's had 30 each of the last 2 years. And that makes me think, well, if the guy was getting on base higher than a 298 clip, I mean, how many stolen bases could this guy have? And then you start to think, I mean, with the elite defense, and we've talked about so many times, it's... Again, like Jose, it's such a well-rounded player, but he's missing that really, really important thing of hitting. So I don't know what the solution is. It's tough. The walk rate's really low. The power has just disappeared.
Yeah.
And he doesn't make hard contact.
It's the power for me.
Yeah. So I don't know where this goes. I know I don't know, because the salary is going to go up and up and up, and as elite of a defender as he is, and I would assume shortstops in his future at some point whenever Travis Bazzana's ready. Um, I are you going to be getting your money's worth in the future? Like, where does his
I don't
career
know.
go?
I don't know.
It's weird. It's uncharted territory for this team to be paying anyone what they're going to be paying him. It's like the list is only a handful of guys. It's Edwin Encarnacion, it's Carlos Santana, it's Jose Ramirez. And for the first two guys, it was those guys for like a year. Maybe like Kluber at the end. But, I mean, Jimenez is going to make 10 and a half next year, then 15 and a half, and then 4 years, 3 years, and then a team option where it's 23 and a half. We don't need to start having this conversation yet. I'm just wondering where this goes, because I think they thought along the same lines where it was okay. Maybe he was hitting above his head 2 years ago, but man, I don't think they foresaw an 83 WRC plus in 2024.
No, but I feel like if he lives where he was at in total value, no matter how he gets there, like he did in 23, where he was almost a 4-win player, then that's good. That's 4-win player. This team can't sneeze at that. And we'll see
Yeah,
what
he was
happens
better
when he moves
offensively.
positionally. Exactly. If you look at the offensive numbers, the walks were down a little bit from where I'm not going to talk about 22. Let's talk about 23 and 24. The walks were down a little bit, like 1%, and the strikeouts were also down, but so was the power. Now, if you look at just below the surface, some of his expected numbers, he actually was pretty much the same guy in expected weighted on base average. He exceeded that luck in 23 and was below that luck in 24. So somewhere in the middle is probably where he should be between these two seasons. But the biggest drop off is the power. You went from a guy that had an isolated power of 169 in 22 down to 147 in 23, and then 087 the power just completely disappeared. And you're looking at that home run total. We never believed he was a guy that's going to get to 25, but somewhere in that 15 to 17 range, which is where he was at heading into this year, felt absolutely doable for him and kind of where he needed to be. The on base is down. Some of that is the walks. The average was the same between these 2 years. The biggest difference is he just pulled the ball over the fence a few more times, or several more times in 23 compared to 24. Just get back to where you're at in 23 and continue to steal bases and play that elite level of defense. And I don't think we're going to be complaining about a 4-win player. But if he's an 83 WRC plus like he was this year, and that's the end result of what he's going to be, then I think we're all going to be saying, yeah, I think we all thought this was going to be better than this. And I think the one thing I don't want to lose sight of is that this was his age 25 season. At his age 23 season, he had a 6.1 WAR season. He's entering the part of his career when he should be kind of at his best, where that marriage of still having the skills, but also now the knowledge of being a major league player, and it kind of comes together and they all intersect. He could be setting himself up for another great career year. So I'm not ready to write him off yet.
No, I'm not
It's just
either.
this year, it's just less than what I would have hoped for at my top pick.
I wonder if he needs to go to the Stephen Kwan school of practicing swinging and missing so that you become okay with it to take more chances.
I mean, I wonder, the strikeouts were down 3%. Did he take fewer chances? Was he trying to do something? Was he trying to execute something else offensively? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
He's got to decide what he wants to be.
So, with my second pick, I went with the guy who finished 9th on the team in pitching WAR. A little disappointing. Expected more from him, but he was 9th among the team's starting pitchers. He was 5th, and he hasn't pitched since the first week of April. What a weird year. I went Shane Bieber, and I'm sitting here after those first two starts thinking, the four-peat is on. TJ's going to drop to 0-4 in the war draft. Zach reigns supreme once again. He looked unbelievable in those 2 starts. Didn't allow a run. The changeup was, after 10 years of tinkering with it, finally a pitch he could use. And yet we didn't even know at the time. During that second start, he's pitching with a shredded elbow. It's the stuff of legend. I wonder if he could throw out a ceremonial first pitch with his left hand during the playoffs. Shane Bieber got
That
me
might be all they ask of their
0.8.
starters in the postseason. They just get it to the bullpen, throw that one pitch, and get out of there.
Shane Bieber got 0.8 WAR. And, that's in 2 starts. So if he would have made 30 starts, he would have set records. That's a lot of math. But, yeah, I mean, I think I nailed my first 3 picks. The injury bug here hurt, and his future is really interesting. I don't know where it'll take him. Haven't seen him in a little while. He was around the team a few times. He'd come to Cleveland for checkups. But I don't think he has been in maybe like 6 weeks. I remember he was in Minnesota in early August and then came back to Cleveland right after that. But curious to see if we'll see him in the postseason. And just remember in 16, like Brantley standing off to the side during every clinching celebration.
I think it's an awkward place. You would say, "Oh, I wish he would be here. He should be here. These are his teammates," and that's true. But putting myself in the shoes of someone that would be going through something that Brantley did, something that Bieber has gone through, you weren't really part of this ride, and you don't really know where you fit in. Like, yes, you're still part of the team, but to what level, to what extent, I don't know. And so I can sort of understand why I'd want to have my distance, because I didn't really have my hand in this. You guys did this, and I don't want to take anything away from that, but I also want to be here to support you. I don't know. I don't think there's an easy answer for someone in that position. And it is disappointing just from the standpoint of watching this guy operate. It would have been so fun if he really had kind of married everything that he needs to be the best version of himself, with the velocity where he's at, where his secondary stuff is where it wants to be in the changeup, and the knowledge of how to pitch when you don't have your best stuff. It just looked like he was set up to be just an absolute beast this year. What does the future hold for him? I've gotten questions. Does this mean that he could stick around here in Cleveland and sign a 2-year contract to just get back on the field? And maybe we haven't seen the end of him in Cleveland. Maybe he texted you right now to tell you. I don't know. But I think it did open up the door a little bit, and that's unfortunate. Compared to no chance, this guy's gone at the end of this year. Now I'd say there's it's not quite a 0% chance, let's say. Now, he was in consideration for me with my second pick. You took him off the board, so I didn't have to worry about it. But I think I would have went with this man anyway, just because of those injury concerns. I felt like this was more of a sort of similar to Jimenez, gave me a safer floor. I went with Tanner Bybee, and it proved to be pretty much as we drew it up, a very solid, not spectacular, but good year. I know he missed some starts in the middle of the season, but it wasn't a prolonged stretch where he was out. We said he pretty much needed to take the ball every 5th day for this team to have success, and he almost got to that level. Not quite, but a 3.47 ERA, a 3.56 FIP. That's maybe not to the, as we grew accustomed to seeing peak Bieber or peak Kluber levels of ace-level success, but this is a very solid starting pitcher. There's no doubt about that, and he did that in his second full big league season. I'm excited for what is going to become of him, and I'm excited to get 3.3 wins above replacement from Tanner Bybee.
How much are you looking forward to seeing him pitch in just a playoff atmosphere? He's a guy who, anytime he gets pulled from a game, he's not hiding his emotions. You know exactly.
Uber competitive.
Yeah. And so to see that on the big stage in the playoff atmosphere, and I'm looking forward to that.
You just never know. Can you funnel it into into the right areas of adrenaline as opposed to letting it work against you. That's
Hmm.
you don't know until you're out there, until you're tested. I don't know.
I do think it was a good season for him. I think it was a step forward. I think that second year as a starting pitcher is maybe the more difficult one, because of all the adjustments you have to make, and it's almost like the first year is just a whirlwind, and it's going so fast, and you almost don't have time to sort of understand what's happening with you. And year two, we've seen so many pitchers where it looks like maybe they step back, and maybe it's more about growth that you don't see because it's under the surface. And with him, I think you saw like adjustments being made in real time, and the manager giving him opportunities to prove he can trust him. And he's the one guy that you just don't worry about. I'm pretty confident next year he'll be the
Yeah.
first starting pitcher taken off the board in this draft, and he'll make his 30 plus starts, and that'll be that.
Kind of unfair. We just kind of
Yeah,
overlook him because he is such a steadying force, and maybe he doesn't get the
but
credit he deserves for
but he
being
would,
that anchor.
but he'd agree with this, right? That's he. If he doesn't
Sure.
pitch great, you can tell, you hear it in his voice, you see it, like he's really hard on himself. Like I think he expects greatness, and it's again that's why I don't know. He's maybe because he shows emotion. Like there are other people I'm excited to see on a big stage too. Like just with Gavin Williams stuff, and when he's on and he's really good, just because that exists, I'm excited to see what he looks like in the postseason. I'm excited to see Matthew Boyd just because of what he went through. Like different reasons for everybody, but with Bybee, just because of that competitive nature, and because he allows us in to see exactly how he feels, that's going to be fun. So I had Stephen Kwan next, and let me tell you something. I looked into my crystal ball in March, and I said, man, this guy, he's going to slash 292, 368,
So
425. He's going to play
oh, screw
exemplary
you.
defense again. He's going to set a career high, more home runs than he had in his previous 2 years combined. He's going to walk more than he strikes out. And you're going to be like, oh my God, how did this guy drop to the 5th overall pick? What a great season. Not going to tell you that he missed 40 games. Not
Yeah.
going to tell you that he only stole 12 bases. And I'm not going to tell you that he flirted with a 400 average and you were kicking yourself probably thinking that I was going to run away with this war draft. And then he went ice cold and got injured again. And what a weird year. But if you just have no idea how he got there and you only looked at the final numbers, you would say, yeah, what a great player. What a
What an
well-rounded
incredible
player.
year.
What a
Yeah.
deserving all-star.
This was the one pick. Looking back on it, I had some considerations myself between Bybee and Kwan. And I think any one of us would have known that there was some more power to be tapped into. You probably would have taken him with the second pick instead of Bieber. I, I'm kicking myself over this pick because you know how much, even into his rookie year, I was celebrating getting him up here and seeing what he could become. And we said it at the time. We think there's more power in there. I don't know. He surprised us this year with as much as he found.
I think he's probably going to be treated unfairly because I think there's going to be a lot of people who look at his season and say, yeah, but you could have hit 350. You could have slumped and hit 350. If you just look at the numbers and you don't look at where he was at certain points, it's a fantastic season, especially considering he lost a quarter of it to injury. Otherwise, we're sitting here saying 5-6 win season for sure.
Yeah.
So
Add another 140 plate appearances to his total.
yeah, and so I think he learned some things. He's going to have to go back and examine what happened. Why was he rolling so well for so long? What caused the setback offensively? And why was it that he kept spiraling and couldn't seem to get out of it? And I think he can examine the hitter he was the first 2 years and the hitter he was this season, the changes he made to evolve as a hitter. And did it work? I think it did. Are there adjustments he can make so that you maybe avoid the extremes and are a little more consistent from start to finish? I mean, I think it was a success overall. Like, he put up numbers, the slash line is as good or a little bit better than it was certainly last year. And yet he added more power. So, and yet still didn't, he spent, like I said, he spent the offseason in the cage saying, all right, I got to be okay with swinging and missing and taking more chances. And what do you know? He was able to hit for more power and not swing and miss more and not strike out more. So I think he found some things that worked. It's just a matter of, can you be more consistent? Just so, and not even like every player gets hot and cold. And again, you look at the end of the year and like you would sign up for a year where he hits 292, reaches base 368 clip, hits 14 home runs, and the WRC plus is like, that's like, I think in WAR, even though he missed 40 games, he was still top 10 in the American League in WAR. Like, I'm thinking, does he make my ballot? Like really impressive season for him, even though he missed a bunch of time. It's just, can you, if you could hit 300 from start to finish instead of 400 for half the season and 200 for half the season, I think puts the team in a better chance, in a better position to succeed. So,
yeah, sure. I'm glad we're doing this now as opposed to after the postseason, because this is a regular season draft. And we often, based on what happens in the postseason, some of our ideas of what we think about these players are going to change. If Stephen Kwan is on fire, then I think you're going to remember this entire season in a positive light. But if this struggle that he's been in for quite a while continues, then I think it's going to leave just more of a sour taste in your mouth. But doing this now gives us the opportunity to zoom out and examine the overall offensive season, and it's a fantastic season overall. Defensively, he's going to be there, and a 131 WRC plus, every single one of us would have sprinted to grab that opportunity. And overall, it's a great one. And it's the point in the draft where I think if I'm going to end up losing this, ultimately, it's between these two picks. It's that one for you and Tristan McKenzie for me. Ugh. Who gave me -1 win above replacement. My third pick is in the negative, Zach. This is not a good place to be. And you understand why I took him with my third overall pick. I just thought, worst case scenario, he's still going to be able to give you a start every 5 days and give you something positive. It's just, it wasn't there. It wasn't there. And there were times where he was one of the worst starters in the American League this year, unfortunately.
did you think when he went down, and his last start was June 28th, what would you have given for the percent chance that he never comes back to Cleveland the rest of the season?
I would have said like a 15% chance.
Yeah. That is not a good sign.
You send him down, you get him right mechanically, and then you get him back up here for August and September. That was my idea. You send him down in a lower pressure packed environment so that he can make those adjustments that are tough to make at the major league level between starts. You can overhaul a delivery in an off season or work on a specific grip on a pitch to try to shape the movement the way that you want. But between starts at the major league level, that's almost impossible. And so I thought a trip to AAA was trying to get him right, but he just never could get right. And they even tried your suggestion of putting him in the bullpen, and it never got there, at least not yet. I mean, I guess they could decide to do it, but it never got there.
What do you do with him?
I don't know. What is... mean,
He's going to be
he's going to get
arbitration
an
eligible.
opportunity. Right. He's going to get an opportunity to be back in this rotation.
I don't know. I have no feel for what his path is moving forward. It's too bad because he's a great dude and he has proven, he was, I think, the 42nd overall pick in the draft, and for good reasons. But I don't know where this goes from here. And I think that, I maybe he considers. I haven't talked to him since he went to AAA, but maybe he can. I could see him saying, he can at least lean on the fact that he made it through the season healthy. I know a lot of people were probably screaming right now, he should have gotten the surgery. Well, okay. He would know better than John from Seven Hills, but also
I didn't think it didn't look like a matter of velocity to me. It didn't
no,
look
and
like a matter of
that's
health
also in the past
necessarily.
Like it's a moot point now. So how can you get him better? What kind of pitcher can he be? That's up to Carl Willis and the pitching staff to figure out. But a lot of this I think is just confidence too, and I don't know how that gets solved.
I don't know how we get to the end of this draft if we spend 40 minutes on the first top
Well,
three picks on
this
either
is
side.
supposed to be reviewing every player. Okay, we'll speed through this. Bo Naylor was next for me. If you would have told me that he was going to hit 200 and he was going to not walk a ton and he was going to strike out 31% of the time and his WRC plus would be 74, I would say, man, what a bad draft pick. The one saving grace for me is he became one of the better defenders behind the plate. And kudos to him for that. Also helps that every single person he walks past every day is either a current or former catcher. He had meetings with David Fry and Austin Hedges on a daily basis, and then he'd walk into a room and, hey, there's Stephen Vogt, former catcher. There's Craig Albernez, former catcher. There's Sandy Alomar, former catcher. He couldn't get away, and it helped him defensively. He got me 1.6 WAR. I'll take it because it's going to get pretty ugly from here for me. But they need more offensively.
You still got one really good one left. If I would have said this, who was the most disappointing player of this season, it probably would have been between Tristan and Bo Naylor. Tristan's the obvious one. I mean, he didn't even make it through the whole season. So Naylor at least got you there, and he did everything you're talking about defensively. But I think we all expected more offensively from Bo. Not that he had to live up to what he was doing last year, because that felt even above his head. But be closer to a league average bat, and then do all that other stuff that we like defensively, and you got a really great player. Not writing that off. Still very young, and catchers could take a long time. Take a long time to grow into what you are offensively. We see the glimpses of the power. It's in there a little bit. I think he's capable of being a league average bat offensively, but didn't happen this year. My next pick, Gavin Williams. I was hopeful that he wasn't going to miss as much time as he did. Didn't make it back until, July? And he was always playing catch-up. The entire time, it felt like this looked like a guy that didn't get into his normal ramp-up like everyone else did, and there were glimpses of the guy that we hoped he would become this year, and then there was just a lot of bad, too. And he had to deal with it all. And maybe when we look back on his career, perhaps an experience like this proves to be beneficial for him, because he had to fight through it. He had to go through this adversity. He had to learn how to be more of a complete pitcher, and maybe he becomes better off for it. But in the midst of trying to win a WAR draft, I was hopeful for more than 1.3 wins above replacement for Gavin. And I will say, I am disappointed that he didn't get that bulk. And maybe he could have added a point 0.1, 0.2, 0.3 to that WAR total by the end of the day, because pitchers can accumulate it fast if he would have went out there and thrown 4 or 5 innings for me and struck out a lot of people. Who knows? But more importantly, the team had hopes of seeing him come in a relief situation. That might be how he helps in the division series. He didn't get that opportunity. So now how do you simulate that for him? I don't know if you can ever get close. And he might be thrust into something he's not accustomed to doing.
Yeah, I thought and we can get into this more later in the week, but I thought, I had a feeling that he's going to play a big role in the postseason, and maybe not even in a good way. Like, I just think he has the potential to swing it one way or the other. He's like the biggest enigma on this team. And to fortify that belief, I wanted to see him pitch on Sunday. And now I won't get that. I don't think watching him face his teammates in an empty ballpark in the middle of the week is really going to help change my opinion one way or another. I still though, I mean, with his stuff and we've seen the best and worst of him. Like, I don't know what role that's going to be. I think they really want Alex Cobb to make a start, and that would push Williams to the bullpen, but who knows? We'll see. I went Logan Allen.
Finally, a bad draft pick for you. Only took to your 5th pick.
You had 3/5 of the rotation. I felt like I needed a starting pitcher. I thought his floor would be kind of high. Instead, it was like 6 feet under. 20 starts, and most of them were just bad. ERA pushing 6. Just nothing really here. You know, the walk rate was too high. Strikeout rate was too low. We gave up so many home runs. I don't know. I don't know what he is moving forward. You know, another guy who went to AAA, came up to make a few spot starts, but like at no point was ever like, oh, well, like Logan Allen will be ready to come back soon. Like, there was no thought that he should be part of the conversation about the rotate. Like, there's a reason that they added Boyd and added Cobb. And yeah, it's just, I don't know. I don't, again, he could be a guy who is in contention for a spot next year. Like, if you go to spring training with a few guys who you want to grant rotation spots to, and then maybe there's like 5 or 6 guys fighting for 1 or 2 spots, he'd be one of the 5 or 6 guys, but you don't want him to be at the top of that list, I think. So,
No.
A very disappointing
you're not
season for him.
You're not going in and making any plans, but I think he's also a guy that you're thankful to have still.
Depth is important.
I don't think depth is important, but also I just don't think the end of his story is written. There's still much to be decided about where he's going to be and where he fits in. And so much just happens throughout the course of a year, not only in adding guys that we didn't foresee, like, there's no Boyd on this list for either of us. There's no Lane Thomas. And these are guys they bring in the middle of the season. But also, who would have thought that Cade Smith was going to come up and have the season that he did? There's just so many unexpected outcomes that happen over the course of 162, or in the case of this, 161.
I will say one stat on Logan Allen real quick. He gave up 22 home runs in 97 innings in Cleveland, which is not good. That's 2 per 9. That's too high. Then he went to AAA, and he gave up 12 in 48 innings, which is even worse. So that's 34 home runs allowed in 145 innings. That's rough. So I he's got the sort of stuff that can get whacked. He's got to be in command, and just didn't have it this year. And anyway, burying the lead here, he got me negative 0.7.
Thank goodness. Trying to keep up with me a little bit. I feel really good about my next pick, Josh Naylor. 2.3 wins above replacement out of my 5th pick. Extremely excited about that. His season, it's kind of weird. If I would have told you that his walk rate is going to go up, that his strikeout rate will go up a little bit, but not severely compared to where he was at last year, that his isolated power would actually be a little bit higher this upcoming year, you'd be excited about all these different little elements. And I tell you, he hits 31 home runs, drives in 108, and he plays 152 games. You would have been extremely excited about it. And overall, still a very solid year. Ended up being an all-star. He had a 118 WRC plus when it was all said and done. But if you look at it, He was a better hitter last year
Hmm.
overall when he only hit 17. What is his best form?
I don't know.
Is it the guy that hits 30 bombs, or is it the guy that hits closer to 20 but also hit 308 last year? Now, he was a big beneficiary of some good luck and batting average on balls in play last year. Really bad this past year when he hit 243 in 24. So probably not quite a 308 hitter at his best and probably not a 243 at his worst. But in terms of just below the surface, again, the expected weighted on base average was better last year than where he was at this year. And it matched it in terms of WOBA too. So it's not like, oh, he just had some extreme bad luck that explains why maybe he was a better hitter this year when he hit 31 home runs. No, below the surface, pretty comparable when it's all said and done. But just how he got there was so unique compared to completely different hitter, completely different. So what do you want him to be moving forward? Do you want him to be this guy? Do you want him to be closer to what he was at last year? Doesn't matter because he's still in the same ballpark and hitting in the middle of the lineup. He was doing a lot of damage. I don't know.
It,
Interesting to see what he becomes next year and beyond.
yeah, it is strange because he hit 31 home runs and yet his slugging percentage 456 was like it's good, but I thought it'd be higher. It was 33 points lower than last season. Now, part of the reason he got to 31 home runs is for the first time in his career, he was healthy, played every day. Like that's a big step for him. And he did that and he boosted the walk rate to a career best rate. I think that's important. The strikeout rate is still for a guy hitting, there are not very many guys hitting 30 plus home runs and striking out as infrequently as he did. So there are some really, really good elements there. I'm with you. Like, what does a career year for him look like? That's the question I have. Can he hit 280 and hit 30 home runs? Can he, like, what does this look like in its peak form? And that's maybe a prudent question because he's got one more year left of team control.
Yeah.
So does he
Yeah.
do that next year? Does he do that next year in Cleveland? And what does that set him up for?
I don't really think of him as a trade candidate because I think even saying this a couple of years ago, he means more to Cleveland on the field than he would in a potential trade, given the position that he plays. And I know he made it through pretty much a full season this year, but we say healthy for Naylor, but this dude was banged up every single day. Now, I don't use that as an excuse because that's just guys. Some guys are more prone to getting banged up all the time, and that's just the way they have to live in their career. You can't just assume, oh, well, he'll come back next year and he'll be healthier and even better. I mean, he could, and guys have career years. A big reason for that is probably health related. It just they happen to be extremely healthy in that given year. I don't know. I don't know what he. This is another guy that kind of has to look himself in the mirror when it's all said and done and say, was this satisfying for me? Is this the best of what I want to be, or how do I improve? Am I okay with maybe being a guy that only hits 25, but does hit for that little bit higher average and maybe a little bit more consistency across the board instead of boom or bust, which I think he was more prone to this year compared to where he was at in 23. I don't know.
Sixth round, I went Emmanuel Clase.
Whew, good. Whew.
Pretty good pick, right? I think I think it's the best relief season I've ever seen. I do. Andrew Miller like flashes in my head whenever I say that out loud, just because Miller was just so dominant, and it was just watching hitters flail at that slider was amazing and more visually appealing than watching a hitter get jammed on a Class A cutter and like hit a little bloop to shortstop. Um, but what a season. 47 saves, which is the new franchise record. He became the franchise all-time saves leader. An 0.61 ERA, 2.3 WAR out of a reliever is not even the highest total in his own bullpen. But neither of us drafted Cade Smith because we're bad at this. But he just, I wouldn't be surprised the way he talks. Like, I bet he's a little frustrated that he only got 74 appearances, only went 74 in the third innings.
Really could have been used a little bit more.
Yeah, and you're going to see him so much in the postseason. You're going to get tired of him. It's going to be 2 innings night after night, I think. Um, what a year for him. I
I
know both Cy Young voters in Cleveland I have spoken with in the last 24 hours, and both have stressed about where do you put this guy? It's such a unique situation, especially with the starting pitching candidates. Obviously, Scooble's going to win probably unanimously, but after that, it's really strange. And,
yeah.
maybe Class A winds up with one of the better finishes we've seen in the last 20 years, but we'll see. We've talked about him ad nauseum this year. He's incredible. And, I'm excited for him to just honestly, one, get more attention. I still think because relievers, there's so much turnover and volatility year after year, it's like hard for them. The Jansons and the Kimbrels and those guys are all at the end of their careers. And, I'm wondering like who's going to take over. And Class A has such a good opportunity to do that, to get more notoriety. And he deserves it. The guy's unbelievable. And I can't wait to see like what the conversation becomes in a few years when he does more of this, even if it's not to this level.
And the different types of dominance, I think, is what makes this fun. We have seen the Miller where he'll come out and make guys look foolish, finally swinging at that back foot slider, which they had no business doing, and just looking so defeated as they walk back to the dugout. And that's fun to watch. But there'd be times where it would take him 7, 8, 9 pitches to finally get to that point when he'd wipe them out with that slider. For Class A, the level of dominance, but the sheer level of consistency and quickness that he gets through these outings, I think, is what I marvel at every single night. It doesn't have to be just the strikeouts that are fun to watch. Just seeing a guy just be done in 3 pitches or fewer, and it's just a ground out to second. They're moving on. Lazy fly ball to center field. He did that on 4 pitches. And so while, yes, it is fun to watch just the lethal strikeouts on that slider from Miller in the past, I think for the sake of what this team needs from their closer in the postseason, having a guy that can do it as quickly as he can and get you back to the dugout as fast as he often does might end up being a big deal for this club. So my next pick, it's not too bad, actually, in terms of just value created. 1.1 wins above replacement from Brian Rocchio. Before the season started, we didn't know who was going to get the bulk of the opportunities at shortstop. We knew going into the year it was going to be Rocchio, but there was also Arias. There were also other guys in the mix. Some we saw, some we didn't. But I decided to play it safe here. I just thought if Rocchio plays what looks to be a full season, playing at shortstop, playing at least average defense there, he's going to create some value, and that's pretty much what we saw. A 79 WRC plus, not that great. A 206 average, not that great, but good defense for most of the year. I know he had some hiccups, some young player hiccups, but overall the metrics were pretty positive on him. He got me 1.1 wins above replacement. I'll take it.
It's a good mid-round pick. Be curious to see.
It didn't kill me. It didn't kill me.
To see how we divvy up the middle infield next year. 7th round, I went Kyle Manzardo, and boy, if we only did a September war draft, he wound up at 0. But you think about his season, and I think everybody feels like he's in a better place. And I think, like, hasn't he done enough over the last few weeks to sort of get you excited for next season and what he could do?
Yeah.
He wound up with a 98 WRC plus, and that's after his first tour in Cleveland doing very little at the plate. So a nice recovery for him. You see the power. You see he just looks like a guy who's going to hit 25 home runs, have 30 doubles, walk a bunch. Like, he's going to be a pretty solid hitter. And we've seen a taste of that. Like, he's been hitting second, and I don't think people are like, this is absurd, this is preposterous. And there's no one else really. But
Yeah, I think that might be the biggest thing.
Yeah, so he got me 0 WAR, which is actually pretty good for given the second half of my draft.
Yeah. God, I feel like if we just take the top picks out of the mix, I kicked your butt, but we'll see where the rest of this goes. I went Will Brennan. Will Brennan just felt like a safe pick to be around the whole year. I don't know if he was going to start or if he's going to accumulate a ton of WAR, but when you start getting to the middle of this draft, I just wanted to get a guy that was going to give me something, and he ended up giving me a half a win. There were times where I really couldn't wait for this guy to get to the plate because when he's hot, he actually can be a guy that has some singles and doubles and contributes. But then he'll be cold for quite a while. He was not around for a little bit in the middle of this season, but I'll take .5 wins above replacement. He probably shouldn't be anybody's starting right fielder at least this point in his career, but maybe he ends up impacting things as a pinch hitter too. He's demonstrated a little bit of an ability to do that here recently. We'll see.
Oh, my next couple picks. Okay, so I went Ramon Laureano. I knew he'd get a shot. Remember, he hit third on opening day. Former teammate of the manager. Thought he could, they gave him $5 million. Thought he'd at least be able to feast on lefties. And no, did not work. Negative .2 WAR, the worst position player on the team by that metric this season. And lo and behold, he goes to Atlanta and he has an 818 OPS for the Braves. So we've seen this story before. Eddie Rosario, part 2. Though I will say with the Braves, like his 7 walk to 62 strikeout ratio, something about that screams that he's had some good luck or sequencing, or I don't know. That's just, you don't usually see that sort of walk to strikeout ratio with a good hitter, but he's hit for some power. He's destined to be the NLCS MVP, but for me, he got me negative .2.
Gotta get in the playoffs. We'll see later today.
I do give them credit for cutting ties with him as early as they did, especially given his ties.
Well, that's the thing
to the coaching staff.
What he ended up becoming was just a shade above a league average bat. I anticipated that this year. I think you would have anticipated that. And if they would have kept him around this year, that's probably where he ends up. But the thing is, cutting him loose enabled them to eventually arrive at Jhonkensy Noel, who won them several games. Now, I know he's gone cold. Some of that, I wonder, did the team actually cool him a bit by not playing him when he was still the tail end of his hot streak? I don't know. I think maybe that's an easy scapegoat for me to justify kind of where he's fallen. But this was a guy that was helping you win games, and you got there eventually. I know he had to go through Rodriguez first because that's the role that Laureano was in. And you could have gotten Laureano, or you could have arrived at where Noel is. Aren't we better off knowing that Noel could be a contributing factor in 25? Not that I'm drawing him up as the starting right fielder, but this is now a guy that I know much more about than I would have if you never saw him in the big league level. So I think you checked off 2 boxes there. Tyler Freeman. I was feeling decently good about that pick. This guy had emerged as the center fielder and was helping them win earlier in the year. Not so much late, and really cooled off. Interesting. He stepped in when Kwan was down. And again, it looked like a guy that was going to help them, even if it was just going to be off the bench. But just the overall season kind of went off the rails late. Ended up getting me .3, so it wasn't a negative. He helped out a little bit, nudged me in the positive. Not as good as my next pick, but again, 8th round pick. At least I didn't go in the negative here.
Well, and at least you didn't do this. I tried to cover for my Ramon Laureano risk by taking the other guy who would certainly finally live up to all the hype when he was a top 50 prospect and tons of power and speed. Estevan Florial. He got me .1. Great dude, speaks 3 languages. Doesn't seem like he's a big leaguer. Far too many strikeouts. Didn't really hit for power here. Didn't really hit at all. 80 WRC plus. He got shown the door. Did get me 0.1. I'll take it. I needed it.
Cool moment against his former club, too.
Yeah.
God, that's how long a season is. That's how long a season is. Guys helping you in April become afterthoughts later on. My next pick, I feel really good about this one. I felt more pleasant about it at the All-Star break, but 1.7 out of David Fry. I had some ideas that he might be a guy that plays a lot. Certainly the help against lefties was going to be big. I thought him catching was going to help get me a lot more, but unfortunately the injury took that off the table, and it really hurt the versatility of this club, as we covered for multiple shows. But this probably my proudest moment is getting Fry with my 9th overall pick. 1.7. He was a big factor for this team in the first half and was an all-star. How amazing.
Yeah, and
going to look at his baseball reference page, and I know you love doing that. You're going to look in the future and go, David Fry, all-star? Yeah, well, he was.
wouldn't he be a perfect platoon partner with Bo Naylor? If you just next year let him hit
shaping up to be that,
lefties, and if he can be good enough defensively behind the plate, he's another interesting guy. Like, I'm curious to see. The one thing we'll never know is if he was still able to catch, if he was still able to play the field, to play the outfield. How different would things have looked down the stretch? Would he have hit better? Would he not have cooled off to the degree that he did? We'll never know. It also hurt them from a versatility standpoint defensively, and even now, like, he's basically limited to be Kyle Mansardo's platoon partner. But we'll see what that looks like next year, assuming he is healthy and can throw and all that. But yeah, impressive season for him. Him being an all-star will always be cool, especially since it was in his backyard. So.
Yeah.
My 10th pick.
And contributing in the All-Star game.
Yeah.
Didn't just go up there and strike out. Contributing.
And also, like,
how about that?
He's almost like the conscience of the clubhouse. Like, if you want to know what's going on, like, he has such a good feel for everything going on. I think he is, like, you hear about Hedges, you hear from Hedges because he's so loud and he is a great leader. But I do think David Fry and he are, like, connected at the hip, and Fry's been an awesome influence on this group too. Chase DeLauder was my 10th pick. Injury-riddled season. When healthy, we saw flashes of a dude who, weird swing and all, should next season come up here and mash, but 0 from him.
That's all right. I understood it. You gotta take some big swings late in the draft. This was trying to cover myself. In fantasy football, you take the one running back and then you take his backup just to protect you. I thought that's what I was doing with my next pick. And I took Arias, and no, that didn't end up working out so well. He actually took value away from what Rocchio brought. So negative 0.2 from Gabby Arias. Ugh.
11th pick, I went Scott Barlow. I thought he'd be the setup man. Boy, what we thought about the bullpen in March was much different than what ended up happening.
Yeah.
Barlow, he ended up getting me 0. It was a big struggle there toward the end. It was weird with him. The walk rate way too high. The strikeout rate was fantastic. And we talked about this in depth when he was DFA'd, but the fact that you knew what he wanted to get to. He wanted to be able to get to the secondary stuff in a pitcher's count to make you chase and swing and miss at it. And it worked, but he just struggled so much late in the season to get to that point because the fastball was too hittable. And the secondary stuff was really good, but it was tough for him to throw in the strike zone. So just a weird year. They took a risk there. I think it just ends up nobody won that trade. De Los Santos bounced around to, I think, 3 different teams this season. He was pitching for the White Sox this weekend. So, that tells you a lot about where his season went. Just a weird year. I thought there was a chance that, like, especially given, like, Barlow pitched for Brian Sweeney and Ruben Niebla last season. So just all the Cleveland pitching wizardry you could ever want. Now he gets Carl Willis and Joe Torres and Brad Goldberg, but just didn't work out for him. And they're fortunate that it didn't matter because they had a lot of other guys step up.
Here is my DeLauder-esque pick. I took Brito. Juan Brito probably a year early, but I thought maybe there was a path for him to eventually make it to the big leagues this year. Ended up contributing 21 home runs at AAA with his age 22 season, 13 stolen bases. Again, the walks are 13.5% walk rate, 16.1% strikeout rate. The guy that's almost doing those equally. I'm still very excited for what he may bring. He might not ever get to star or even starter potential, but I think this is a guy that can help them in some way coming up as soon as next year. Ended up finishing with a 113 WRC plus. Just wasn't ever quite good enough to kick down the door to get up here, even with some opportunities potentially being there. Where he fits defensively, who knows?
Yeah.
Where is he going to end up playing? I really don't know. But and again, a lot of that stuff's going to work itself. Who would have thought that Tyler Freeman was starting in center field? We'd see Angel Martinez playing lots of corner outfield for this team in 24. Certainly none of us had that on our bingo card. So
he just turned 23 last week, Brito, and there's still elements to his offensive profile that I really like. You saw the increase in power, 21 home runs this season, 40 doubles. Like that's something to take note of. And he walks a ton, and he doesn't strike out a crazy amount. Like there's a lot there that if you can just piece it together and figure out exactly what this guy is, he's a really interesting hitter and a switch hitter. So we'll see. Maybe he starts next season at AAA and then he does knock down the door and you have to find a spot for him. I went Sam Hentges next. Boy, tough season for him. And feel bad for him. I can't imagine he's going to pitch next year after shoulder surgery that's supposed to keep him out 12 to 14 months. I think that's part of why it took so long to finally get clarity and get a date for surgery, is because it reached a point where he was not going to pitch next year either. He did get 0.3 WAR in 23 innings, but just it was stopping and starting and stopping and starting. And, it's always tough for a reliever when you miss that much time as he's going to miss. And it's not even Tommy John. It's shoulder. You have no idea what you're going to look like when you get back. And he's missing like key time, like age range of his career, which really stinks. One saving grace for him, his Minnesota Vikings are 4-0.
It'll take a little bit of positivity there. You should have saw that coming, and you should have known that the guy that would ultimately occupy the eighth inning was still sitting there like I did when I took Hunter Gaddis with my second to last pick. 1.6 wins above replacement. And in all seriousness, we looked at him as a guy that was going to soak up maybe some bulk innings, and we thought maybe he is a guy that eventually gets into being a short one-inning sort of burst reliever. But who could have foreseen that he was just going to, speaking of that word, burst onto the scene and have quite the season that he did. Just unbelievable. I know Cade Smith gets so much love and Clase at the back end. Hunter Gaddis doesn't have quite the same stuff as those two, but still can light up the radar gun and has what I think is the most fun part about him is he just looks like an eighth inning reliever to me. Because the hair and the beard and he's just this big dude. Looks like a guy that I would want occupying my eighth inning. So it just all worked out. And I'm really proud of this. Fry and Gaddis, these two picks I'm extremely proud of.
Yeah, you're right. Like Gaddis is kind of he's almost under the radar, which should be really hard to do with an eighth inning guy with a 150 ERA. It's just incredibly consistent. He had like one bad week, and it was, they think, because he was tipping his pitches. And so they cleaned that up pretty quickly, and then he didn't allow a run for like 2 months. It's just the four-headed monster that they have is insane. I feel like I've written about it a ton of times. We've talked about it a ton of times, and I feel like it's not enough. And I'm like, what else can I write? I feel like I've written everything, but you can't
We've
stop.
just had so many shows devoted to the bullpen.
Yeah, and it'll be on.
People are tired of us talking about it.
It'll be on full display here in the next few weeks. My last pick, kind of salvaged me
Saved
here.
himself.
Joey Cantillo got me 0.4, which is pretty good for this round of this exercise, especially considering it didn't look like that was going to be what he delivered. He had a really nice finish to the season, and I think suddenly you're starting to envision, maybe this guy is one of those 5 who you start in the rotation next year and probably feel pretty good about it. Just, we talked about it, like that White Sox, not only facing the White Sox, facing them after you faced all the best offenses in the league, and they threw them into the fire, and it was a struggle, and then just clicked in Chicago like it clicks for many people in 2024. And he didn't look back. He was pretty good. And then it's funny because then the start against the Astros the other night, like, it wasn't as efficient, and it was okay. It was solid. Like, he still looked like he was in control until the end, and he was not happy with it. And it's funny how your own expectations can change and do so quickly.
Good.
I think this was it didn't look like it was going to be, but it ended up being, I think, a pretty big step forward for him.
Yeah, I agree. Kind of reminds me of the guy that the Rays 5-6 years ago would just turn to be their 4-inning bulk guy. Come in after the opener because they don't trust him to just start the game, but they would somehow get him to a 3.30 ERA, being a guy that would occupy innings 2 through 6. I'm interested to see what becomes of him. Is it going to be just a normal starter that takes the ball every 5 days? I don't know. We saw glimpses of that. Even when he was at his best, I don't know how repeatable it is yet. I just need more. I need more visual. I need more data. I just need more of everything. But considering he was a guy that we were having conversations, would you rather have him? Would you rather have Logan Allen? Well, now I feel much better about Cantillo's future than I do even Logan Allen, at least being a contributing factor for this team in 25 and beyond. My final pick, there was a time where I was really excited about it. He ended up giving me -0.1. It doesn't feel fair, Angel Martinez, that would happen with him, because he kind of saved them at times throughout this year and ended up finishing at -0.1. That's not cool. I feel like I should just get some points for having my last pick be him, but unfortunately it takes away some value. But he was really an important player for this team this year. For as important as a guy that can finish in the negative can be, I think he filled some gaps for this club that they needed at times throughout this year.
Time for the big reveal.
Time for the big reveal. How well did you math?
I mathed. It took three tries on my calculator, but I got it. I don't know what you got.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you first. I finished with a pathetic 15.2. I think you have
both
maybe
math the same way. I finished at 13.6. Yeah, let's get it demonetized. What is this, the karaoke version?
That's 4 in a row.
I hope it's the karaoke version.
Who has it better than me? I'd like to give a shout out to Jose Ramirez, to Stephen Kwan, to Joey Cantillo, to Emmanuel Clase, to just about everybody but Ramon Laureano. We may not even do this next season. I mean, or can I get someone to replace you? I need more competition.
This is not fair. This is not fair, because I think once we passed the first picks on either side, I kicked your ass. I was so much better
Doesn't
in the
matter.
late rounds than you. This is
That
not
doesn't
fair.
matter.
It's not
Do you
fair.
think the Niners are
It's not
sitting
fair.
there like, did you think the San Francisco 49ers raised a banner because they had the lead at halftime of the Super Bowl last year? I mean, play the whole game.
Maybe they should have. Maybe they should have. No, you're kicking my butt.
You know what
here.
you
That's
just
fine.
did?
I'll just
I mean,
accept
that was the most
accept the
Minnesota
loss.
Twins excuse I've ever heard. What was the thing that people were, they had the best record after April 22nd or whatever. And before August 5th.
That doesn't feel. Why does everybody have a stat like that? Everybody. I was reading through.
The White Sox went 5-1 this week. They have the best record since September 24th.
I was reading through some of your colleagues their preview of the Astros Tigers, just getting a feel for the way they thought that was going to go. And on one hand, it was the Astros have the best record since May something, but the Tigers have the best record since July something. So who is the better team? Everybody has a stat. Everybody has a stat, no matter how you do it. This always happened to me in March Madness too. I'd spend more time looking over that 8, 9, 7, 10. I'd spend so much time on that when I'd just forget. Oh yeah, I got to pick who actually wins the whole damn thing, and I can get all these things great in the first round. Oh, I got all those right, but I didn't get the Final Four correct. I just put more belief. I just have to be better at rock, paper, scissors.
I think that's the key. Yeah.
Got to get that right. I got to get that right. All right. You mentioned Cade Smith. Also, Tim Herron would have been a great pick for us. We finished with 1 win above replacement. Ben Lively at 0.8, I believe, also would have been a great pick. We overlooked him. Not shocking, considering what our expectation level was. And he wasn't even healthy at the beginning of the year. Did you have a pick that you thought was your best value pick? And who do you think was your worst overall pick?
Yeah, I mean, the easy answer for me would be Emmanuel Clase. I thought he'd bounce back from last season, but I didn't anticipate this. The worst pick to me, I mean, it's easy to say like Ramon Laureano, but I think it's more just going Laureano and Florial and DeLauder, swinging and missing on 3 consecutive outfielders. But that's, this franchise has done that for 20-some years.
Yeah, you're right there with him. No better, no worse. I feel like it's a tie between Fry and Gaddis. Those are my the two picks I'm proudest of. But if I have to say best value, getting 1.6 out of my second to last pick is pretty hard to top for Hunter Gaddis there.
Well, it just
I
means
feel like
that
I can take a victory lap
next
there.
March, we need to just pick these long shot bullpen hopefuls and just pray that they turn into elite setup men.
I hate picking relievers late because even if they have a great year, it's 0.3, 0.4. We always swing for the fences late. But it's easy to lose sight of. You also don't want to be in the negative either. And sometimes 0.3, 0.4 saves you from getting a -1 like I got from Tristan, who was my worst pick overall. Sad about that. Third overall pick, -1. That's brutal.
Well, the fun thing is, now we get to see these guys in the playoffs. This isn't our start to the off-season episode like it normally is. That's also
right.
cause for celebration.
Coming up later this week at patreon.com/SelbyIsGodcast, position by position. We look at
Over my
whoever
dead
Cleveland
body.
is matched up against. And we will pick a winner based on who wins the most matchups positionally.
You want the Astros or the Tigers?
I think I want the wait. What? Huh? What? I guess the Tigers.